A 4-star general sits in a cold interrogation room, handcuffs cutting into her wrists, blood trickling down her hands. The officers around her are laughing, mocking her military ID, calling her a fraud. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. She wanted this to happen. She planned every single moment of her arrest. And before we reveal how this all unfolds, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because this story of justice and courage will leave you speechless. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The sun was setting over Westfield Heights, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. General Victoria Reeves drove her modest sedan through the familiar streets where she grew up. Modest homes lined the sidewalks. Children played basketball in driveways. Elderly couples sat on porches, waving as she passed. This was her neighborhood, a predominantly Black community filled with hardworking families, teachers, nurses, small business owners. Victoria had come a long way from these streets. 4 stars on her Marine Corps uniform. Decades of distinguished service. A reputation built on integrity and courage. But tonight, she wasn't wearing her uniform. Tonight, she wore civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket, and a watch that was far more than it appeared. As she drove toward the edge of the neighborhood, the scenery began to change. The modest homes gave way to larger houses with manicured lawns. The streets became wider, cleaner. This was Greenfield, the wealthy, predominantly white suburb that bordered Westfield Heights. And right at that border, where 2 worlds collided, blue lights flashed in the distance. A checkpoint. Victoria's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. She'd heard about these checkpoints. Everyone in Westfield Heights had. They'd appeared 6 months ago, strategically placed at every exit from the Black neighborhood into the white suburbs. Officially, they were for public safety. But the stories told a different truth. Stories of harassment, illegal searches, arrests without cause. Stories of people being treated like criminals, simply for driving through their own city. Victoria slowed her car as she approached. This should be simple, she thought. A routine ID check. She'd done nothing wrong. She had every right to be here. But deep down, she knew better. Officer Brandon approached her window, flashlight in hand. He was young, maybe late 20s, with a clean-cut appearance and cold eyes. His flashlight beam swept across her face, harsh and intrusive. "License and registration," he said. Not a greeting. Not a courtesy. Just a command. Victoria reached slowly for her glove compartment, keeping her hands visible. Years of military discipline had taught her how to stay calm under pressure. "May I ask what this checkpoint is for, officer?" Brandon's expression hardened. "Just routine. ID now." She handed over her driver's license. He studied it under his flashlight, and she saw the exact moment his demeanor shifted. His eyes narrowed as he read her address. "Westfield Heights resident," he said into his radio, emphasizing each word like an accusation. "Requesting additional verification." Victoria's heart beat steadily. She'd expected this. "Is there a problem with my identification, officer?" "Wait here." Brandon walked back to his patrol car, her license in hand. Through her rearview mirror, Victoria watched him show her license to another officer. They both looked at her car. One of them laughed. Then Captain Raymond emerged from the command vehicle. A tall man in his 50s with graying hair and an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. Brandon pointed toward Victoria's car. Raymond nodded, then began walking toward her with deliberate slowness. Every instinct told Victoria what was coming next. Raymond stopped beside her window. He didn't lean down, didn't make eye contact, just stared at her car with obvious disdain. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." "May I ask why?" "My license is valid." "Step out. Now." His hand moved to rest on his holster, a gesture meant to intimidate. "We're implementing enhanced search protocol." Victoria knew her rights. She'd studied them extensively. Enhanced search requires reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. "What's your suspicion, Captain?" Raymond's face twisted with anger. "Out of the car." She complied, movements deliberate and calm. As she stood beside her vehicle, she looked him directly in the eye. "I'd like to note that this appears to be selective enforcement. I've watched several vehicles pass through without being stopped." "We decide what's selective," Raymond said, stepping closer. "Hands on the hood." "I decline consent to search my vehicle without probable cause," Victoria stated clearly. Terry versus Ohio and Delaware versus Prowse established clear guidelines for. "Look at the lawyer here," Officer Brandon mocked, moving closer from behind. "Thinks she knows the law." Victoria stood her ground. I'm familiar with my Fourth Amendment rights. Raymond stepped into her personal space. Your kind always want to make things difficult. My kind. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Troublemakers, Raymond clarified. But his meaning hung in the air, transparent and ugly. Around them, other drivers watched from their cars. Some held up phones, recording. Raymond noticed, his jaw clenching. He gestured to another officer. Clear these vehicles through. No recordings. Victoria watched as Officer Lopez moved from car to car, making people put their phones away. She memorized every face, every badge number, every license plate. Her mind cataloged it all like a military database. Last chance, Raymond said, turning back to her. Consent to search or face obstruction charges. I respectfully decline and request a supervisor. Raymond's smile was cold. I am the supervisor. He nodded to Brandon. Detain her. Brandon grabbed Victoria's arm, twisting it behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder, sharp and immediate. She'd been trained to withstand far worse, but she let out a controlled breath. Stop resisting, Brandon shouted, though she stood perfectly still. I'm not resisting, Victoria said clearly, her voice steady despite the pain. I'm complying under protest. Raymond stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You don't tell us how to do our jobs. Victoria noticed Brandon's body camera. The red recording light blinked off. Your body camera appears to be malfunctioning, Officer Brandon. Mind your own business. Brandon tightened his grip. Victoria's military training screamed at her. She could disable both officers in seconds. Years of combat experience had given her skills these men couldn't imagine. But that wasn't why she was here. That wasn't tonight's mission. I'll be filing a formal complaint, she said instead. Raymond actually laughed. Good luck with that. Councilman Stone personally oversees checkpoint operations. Your complaint goes straight to his trash can. Victoria's watch pressed against her wrist. The military-grade recording device that was capturing every word, every admission. Evidence was accumulating exactly as planned. Search the car, Raymond ordered another officer. Sir, without a warrant, Victoria began. We have checkpoint authority under City Ordinance 27-9, Raymond interrupted. Signed by the council last month. Victoria knew that ordinance. Knew its constitutional flaws. Knew exactly who had pushed it through. And if your search finds nothing? Raymond's smile was predatory. Then we'll find something else to charge you with. The officer searching her car called out, Clean, sir. Nothing here. Raymond looked disappointed. Check under the seats. These Westfield people always hide something. Victoria's fingers discreetly pressed a button on her watch. A silent signal transmitted instantly. In a command center at the Pentagon, hundreds of miles away, her GPS location lit up on a screen. Protocol Oversight Delta was now active. Nothing, sir, the searching officer finally reported. Raymond turned back to Victoria, frustration evident. Well, you're still interfering with a lawful checkpoint. That's obstruction. Citing constitutional protections is not obstruction, Captain. And now you're arguing with an officer. Raymond nodded to Brandon. Cuff her. The metal handcuffs bit into Victoria's wrists. Brandon secured them deliberately tight, pain radiating up her arms. A thin line of blood appeared where the metal cut skin. Victoria Reeves, Raymond recited, satisfaction in his voice. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and resisting a lawful checkpoint inspection. In a nearby car, a young woman held her phone low, still recording discreetly. Victoria's eyes met hers briefly. Victoria gave the smallest nod, a silent message. Document this. Remember this. You have the right to remain silent, Raymond continued. I'm aware of my Miranda rights, Captain, Victoria interrupted calmly. I assume you're transporting me to Greenfield Station? Raymond paused, thrown by her composure. That's right. I'll need my phone call when we arrive. You'll get what we decide to give you, Brandon said, shoving her toward the patrol car. As they led her away, Victoria glanced back at the checkpoint. Officer Lopez waved through another car, a white driver who'd barely been asked for ID. 3 more white drivers passed through with minimal interaction. But 4 cars with black drivers were pulled aside for additional screening. Pattern established. Evidence accumulating. Brandon pushed her head down roughly, forcing her into the back seat. Officer Brandon, badge number 4572, Victoria said clearly. That use of force is unnecessary and excessive. Shut up, Brandon snapped, slamming the door. Through the window, Victoria watched Raymond speaking with another officer. He gestured toward Westfield Heights. Laughed. The contempt on his face said everything about what he really thought of her neighborhood, her people. The cruiser pulled away from the checkpoint. Victoria sat calmly in the back seat, her wrists throbbing where the handcuffs cut into her skin. But her mind was clear, focused. She mentally reviewed every detail of the Pentagon protocol she'd just activated. The clock in her head counted down. 43 minutes until the response team arrived. 43 minutes until everything changed. Captain Raymond and Officer Brandon had no idea who they'd just arrested. They saw a black woman from Westfield Heights. Another troublemaker, to be processed and intimidated. They didn't see the 4-star Marine Corps general. They didn't see the decorated combat veteran. They didn't see the woman who'd volunteered for this exact mission. And they definitely didn't see the trap closing around them. As the police station came into view, Victoria allowed herself the smallest smile. Phase 1 was complete. The bait had been taken. Now came the part she'd been planning for 6 months. Now came justice. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. The processing room at Greenfield Station smelled of sweat, stale coffee, and industrial cleaning chemicals that couldn't quite mask the underlying odor of fear and desperation. Victoria stood perfectly still as the booking officer took her mugshot. The camera clicked. Flash. Another piece of evidence captured. Name. The booking officer said without looking up from his computer screen. Victoria Reeves. Address. 1247 Maple Avenue. The officer's fingers paused on the keyboard. His eyes narrowed as he looked up at her for the first time. That's in Westfield Heights. His tone changed completely, recognizing the predominantly black neighborhood. There was disdain in his voice now. Judgment. Victoria said nothing, just pressed her thumb against the fingerprint scanner when instructed. Black ink stained her skin, a temporary mark that would wash away. Unlike the permanent stain these officers were leaving on their own careers. Behind her, Captain Raymond and Officer Brandon stood by the water cooler, their voices deliberately loud enough for her to hear. Another one from that neighborhood, Brandon said, his voice dripping with contempt. Thinking she's special. Raymond chuckled. Acting like the checkpoint doesn't apply to her. Had to put her in her place. These people need to learn, Brandon added. Victoria memorized every word, every inflection, every face watching her with a mixture of amusement and hostility. Her mind recorded it all with photographic precision. Phone call, she said to the booking officer. He pointed to a wall-mounted phone without interest. One call. Make it count. Victoria walked to the phone, her handcuffs still on, making it awkward to dial. But she didn't call a lawyer. Didn't call family. Her fingers pressed a number she'd memorized weeks ago. Operation Center, Pentagon, answered a crisp, professional voice. Authorization code, Tango Delta 794. Victoria spoke clearly. Initiating protocol, Oversight Delta. Location transmitting. A moment of silence. Then, confirmed General Reeves. Response team deploying. Timeline, 43 minutes. Victoria hung up just as the station's front door burst open. Councilman Gerald Stone stormed in, his expensive suit and diamond-studded championship ring gleaming under the harsh lights. He was a large man in his 60s, with silver hair perfectly styled and the confident swagger of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Another troublemaker? Stone demanded, looking through the glass partition at Victoria. Raymond nodded. Just processing her now, sir. Good, Stone said, his voice filled with satisfaction. These checkpoint resistors need consequences. The program is too important to let people undermine it. Victoria was escorted to a holding cell. The door clanged shut with metallic finality. She sat on the cold metal bench, back straight, face composed. The clock on the wall read 9:17 p.m. In exactly 43 minutes, their world would collapse. But first, she had to endure what came next. 2 hours passed. The holding cell was deliberately uncomfortable, cold, harsh lighting, no privacy, designed to break a person's spirit. But Victoria had endured far worse in her military career. Survival training in the desert. Interrogation resistance courses. Combat situations where the difference between life and death was measured in seconds. This was nothing. The cell door opened. Captain Raymond stood there with a thin folder and Victoria's confiscated belongings. Interview room. Now, she was led down a narrow hallway to a small room that smelled of stale coffee and floor cleaner. A single overhead light cast harsh shadows. The metal table was bolted to the floor. Victoria sat in the uncomfortable chair, her handcuffs still tight, still cutting into her wrists. Raymond entered, dropping her belongings on the table with deliberate carelessness. Her wallet, keys, phone, and her military ID. Comfortable? Raymond asked, his smile cold and predatory. Victoria said nothing. In interrogations, silence was often the most powerful weapon. Raymond opened the folder. Victoria Reeves. Westfield Heights address. No prior arrests. He looked up. First time being educated about checkpoint compliance. I'd like to speak with an attorney, Victoria said, her voice level and precise. Soon enough. Raymond circled the table slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. We're just having a conversation first. I invoke my right to counsel. Raymond ignored her, continuing as if she hadn't spoken. See, we have a problem in this town. People who don't respect authority. People who think rules don't apply to them. He leaned against the wall, studying her. Checkpoints keep Greenfield safe. But some folks don't like being checked. Those folks usually have something to hide. Victoria remained silent. Her military training had included extensive resistance to interrogation techniques. Raymond's amateur attempts at intimidation wouldn't break a first-year cadet, let alone a four-star general. Nothing to say? Raymond flipped through her wallet, pulling out cards one by one. Credit cards. Driver's license. Then he found her military ID. He studied it, then actually snorted with laughter. Marine Corps. General. 4 stars. He tossed the ID on the table like it was a playing card. Nice fake. Really nice. The attention to detail is impressive. He leaned forward. But now we're adding impersonating military personnel to your charges. Victoria watched him carefully. That identification is authentic. Right, Raymond laughed. And I'm the Secretary of Defense. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and his expression shifted slightly. A flicker of something Victoria couldn't quite read. He nodded to himself. Our concerned citizen wants to meet you, Raymond said, moving to the door. Someone very interested in the latest checkpoint troublemaker. He left. Through the thin walls, Victoria heard a new voice, authoritative, impatient, entitled. Another one from that neighborhood? It was Councilman Stone. Yes, sir, Raymond responded. Gave us the usual constitutional speech. Had a fake military ID too. Military? Stone sounded intrigued. What branch? Marines. Claims to be a general. Raymond's laugh carried through the wall. Get what you need and process her, Stone said dismissively. Make an example. These checkpoint resistors are undermining the whole program. We can't have people thinking they can just refuse to cooperate. Victoria noticed the one-way mirror on the wall. She could feel Stone watching from the other side, studying her like a scientist observing an insect. The door opened again. Raymond returned with Officer Brandon close behind. Let's try this again, Raymond said, slapping a form on the table. Sign this confession to obstruction. Take a misdemeanor charge. You'll be out by morning. Victoria studied the document without touching it. I'll need my attorney present before signing anything. Brandon stepped forward, positioning himself directly behind her chair. Captain asked you nicely. And I respectfully declined. Raymond nodded to Brandon, who placed heavy hands on Victoria's shoulders, a physical intimidation tactic. The pressure was uncomfortable but not quite painful. A calculated move designed to make her feel trapped, powerless. You people from Westfield Heights, Raymond said, his voice taking on a darker tone. You think you're special. Think the rules don't apply. But Councilman Stone's checkpoint program has cut crime in Greenfield by 30%. By targeting specific neighborhoods? Victoria asked calmly. Raymond's expression hardened. By enforcing the law where it needs enforcing. Selective enforcement isn't legal enforcement, Captain. Brandon's hands tightened on her shoulders. You should listen to the captain. Victoria didn't react to the physical intimidation. I believe this interview is over until my counsel arrives. Raymond collected her belongings, deliberately dropping her military ID on the floor. He stepped on it as he walked around the table, grinding his heels slightly. This little military costume doesn't impress me, he sneered, picking up the ID. Though I admire the details. 4 stars. Ambitious fake. He tossed the ID back on the table like trash. Brandon increased the pressure on her shoulders, leaning down close to her ear. We've got all night. Plenty of time for you to reconsider that signature. A sharp knock interrupted them. The door opened immediately, and a man Victoria hadn't seen before entered. He was in his mid-30s, with intelligent eyes and a detective's shield hanging from a chain around his neck. His suit, while department issue fit properly, suggesting someone who took pride in his appearance and work. "Captain," the man said carefully. A moment outside. Raymond hesitated, then nodded to Brandon. "Watch her." The door closed. Through the wall, Victoria heard urgent whispers. The conversation grew heated, voices rising despite efforts to stay quiet. Someone knocked urgently on the interrogation room door. It opened, and the same detective entered, followed by a visibly agitated Captain Raymond. The detective's badge identified him as Luis Cortez. "Officer Brandon," Cortez said, his voice professional but firm. "You're needed at the front desk." Brandon looked to Raymond, who nodded reluctantly. Brandon left, closing the door firmly behind him. Cortez approached the table. He picked up Victoria's military ID, examining it closely under the harsh light. His eyes moved over every detail, the holographic seal, the microprinting, the UV watermarks. "Captain," Cortez said slowly, "this ID has proper security features. The holographic seal, microprinting, UV watermarks, all authentic military issue." Raymond scoffed. "It's a good fake." "No, sir." Cortez placed the ID gently on the table, treating it with respect. "I served 8 years before joining the department. This is genuine." Raymond's confidence wavered. "So she stole a military ID. Add it to the charges." Cortez turned to Victoria. "Ma'am, may I ask your name and rank?" "General Victoria Reeves, United States Marine Corps." Cortez straightened instinctively, military bearing that doesn't fade with time. His eyes widened as he looked at the 4 stars on her ID again. "Captain," Cortez said quietly, "if she's active military, we have jurisdictional protocols to follow." "I'm handling this case," Raymond interrupted. "Department policy requires verification of military credentials," Cortez persisted. "Section 14 of our procedural manual specifically states." "I know the manual," Raymond snapped. "Then you know we're already in violation of proper procedure." No attorney present despite her request. Continued questioning after Wright's invocation. Extended detention without proper processing. Raymond stepped closer to Cortez, using his height advantage. "Detective, remember your place." But Cortez didn't back down. "My place is ensuring department procedures are followed, sir." He turned back to the ID, examining the rank insignia more closely. His face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, "these are 4 stars." "So?" Raymond was getting defensive now. 4 stars is the highest rank in the Marine Corps, Cortez explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are only a handful in the entire military." Raymond's confidence cracked visibly. "It's still." The interrogation room door suddenly swung open without a knock. Councilman Stone entered, his presence filling the small space with entitled authority. "Captain, what's the delay?" Stone demanded. "I thought this was routine processing." His eyes fell on Victoria, assessing her with the practiced calculation of a career politician. "Councilman," Cortez said, "we have a situation. This woman appears to be a high-ranking military officer." Stone scoffed. "Based on what?" "An ID card. Military identification consistent with a Marine Corps general," Cortez explained. "We need to verify through proper channels before proceeding." "Detective." Stone checked Cortez's nameplate. "Cortez, your concern for procedure is noted. Now let the captain handle this." "Sir, with respect," Cortez stood his ground, "if we've detained a military general improperly, the department faces serious repercussions." "If," Stone emphasized. "A remarkably big if." He turned to Raymond. "Captain, handle the paperwork and process her." "Detective Cortez, you're needed elsewhere." "Sir," Cortez protested, "standard protocol requires." "Standard protocol," Stone interrupted, his voice taking on a harder edge, "is what I say it is. The checkpoint program operates under special city ordinance." "My ordinance." Victoria watched Cortez carefully. She could see the moment his professional ethics confronted political reality. She could see him weighing his career against what was right. The phone on the wall suddenly rang, cutting through the tension. All 3 men turned toward it. Raymond answered. "Captain Raymond." He listened, his expression changing from annoyance to confusion to something approaching fear. "What kind of calls? From where?" He hung up slowly, his face noticeably paler. "What is it?" Stone demanded. "Front desk has received calls," Raymond said slowly, "asking about a General Reeves." Stone's political mask slipped slightly. "From whom?" Raymond swallowed hard. "The Pentagon." The room fell into stunned silence. Stone and Raymond exchanged glances, confusion mixed with the first hints of genuine concern. Probably her friends playing games, Stone dismissed, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain, finish processing Anne. Sir, Raymond interrupted, something he'd never done before. They mentioned her by name, by rank. They knew she was here. Stone turned to Victoria, reassessing her with new eyes. The confidence that had radiated from him began to crack like ice under pressure. Cortez's eyes widened as he looked at the 4 stars on her ID card again. Sir, he said quietly, do you realize who we might have arrested? Stone held up a hand for silence, but his political composure was fracturing. Captain, verify this. Properly. Now. Raymond exited quickly. Through the door, his voice carried back. Yes, sir. Yes, she's here. No, sir. I understand. Sir. Stone stood frozen, watching the door. His championship ring caught the light as his hand trembled slightly. Raymond returned, visibly shaken. That was Colonel Pierce from Pentagon Investigative Services. And Stone's voice was sharp with barely controlled panic. They've confirmed her identity, Raymond said quietly. She is General Victoria Reeves, United States Marine Corps. The room fell deathly silent. Then release her immediately, Stone said, his political instincts kicking in. With our apologies for the misunderstanding. There's more, sir, Raymond continued, his voice hollow. They're sending representatives here. Now. Military police. A full investigation unit. Stone's face went white. What representatives? They specifically mentioned. Raymond paused, swallowing hard. Your checkpoint program, sir. Stone turned slowly to Victoria, and she saw the exact moment understanding dawned in his eyes. The exact moment he realized this wasn't a coincidence. The exact moment he understood he'd walked directly into a trap. This wasn't random, Stone whispered. Your presence at that checkpoint. Victoria met his gaze steadily, her expression calm. No, Councilman. It wasn't random at all. The station's front desk phones began to ring. One line. Then another. Then another. The persistent ringing echoed through the building like alarm bells. Stone moved to the door, closing it firmly, his political composure crumbling. What exactly is happening here? Victoria remained seated, perfectly calm despite everything. What's happening, Councilman, is justice. Outside, multiple radios crackled to life. Voices reported incoming vehicles. Federal agencies. Governor's office. Department of Justice. The trap had closed. And there was no way out. The truth explodes. 6 months of evidence surfaces. And Councilman Stone discovers that some systems can't be corrupted forever. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Chapter 3 is going to blow your mind. The sound of engines filled the parking lot. Through the window of the interrogation room, Victoria watched as 3 black SUVs pulled into Greenfield Station. Military police emerged first. Crisp uniforms, disciplined movements, the unmistakable bearing of soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. Councilman Stone stood frozen at the window, his face draining of color. Captain Raymond gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. Only Detective Cortez remained calm, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The station's front doors opened. Boots clicked against linoleum with military precision. Then a voice cut through the chaos, authoritative, clear, impossible to ignore. Where is General Reeves? A man in full dress uniform entered the interrogation room. Silver Eagle insignia identified him as a colonel. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing powerful. 2 military police officers flanked him. Colonel Pierce, Pentagon Investigative Services, he said, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Victoria. He saluted crisply. General Reeves. Victoria stood, returning the salute despite her handcuffs. Colonel, thank you for the prompt response. Of course, ma'am. Pierce turned to the others, his gaze settling on Stone and Raymond with obvious disdain. I'm Colonel Alexander Pierce, Pentagon Investigative Services. These are my associates. He gestured to the MPs. Councilman Stone. Captain Raymond. You will remain in this station. My team will have questions for you shortly. Stone's political smile snapped into place like a mask. Colonel, this has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. We had no knowledge that. Noted, Pierce interrupted, his tone making it clear he didn't care. He turned to Raymond. Captain, secure this room. We'll need your main conference room for our operations. Raymond hesitated. Colonel, this is a police station. You don't have jurisdiction. I have direct authorization from the Secretary of Defense. Pierce cut him off. pulling a document from his jacket. Your cooperation is not optional. The station transformed within minutes. Military personnel moved through the building with practiced efficiency, setting up equipment in the conference room. Computer specialists began accessing the station's systems. An evidence collection team secured records, files, and surveillance footage. Stone watched this invasion with growing alarm. He pulled out his phone, fingers shaking as he dialed. I need to call my attorney. This response is excessive for a simple detention issue. Victoria stepped forward, Detective Cortez gently removing her handcuffs. She rubbed her wrists where the metal had cut into her skin, thin lines of dried blood visible. This isn't about my detention, Councilman, she said quietly. It's about what my detention represents. Stone's phone call went to voicemail. He tried another number. Then another. Each time voicemail. Pierce gestured to the door. General, if you'd like to brief the team? Victoria nodded. As she walked past Stone, she paused. 6 months, Councilman. We've been watching for 6 months. The color drained completely from Stone's face. The conference room had been completely transformed. Digital displays covered one wall, showing maps, data charts, and surveillance footage. A dozen military personnel and federal agents worked at laptops and computer stations. The room hummed with focused activity. Victoria stood at the head of the table, now wearing a Marine Corps jacket someone had brought for her. The 4 stars gleamed on her shoulders, no longer hidden, no longer deniable. Stone and Raymond sat at the far end of the table, separated from each other. Officer Brandon had been brought in, confusion and fear evident on his face. 2 military police officers stood by the door. Detective Cortez entered carrying a case file and a small USB drive. General, I've brought the internal documentation you requested. Thank you, Detective. Victoria's voice was calm but carried undeniable authority. Your assistance has been invaluable. Pierce activated the main display. A map of Greenfield appeared, covered with colored dots and markers. Gentlemen, Victoria began, her voice filling the room with quiet power. 6 months ago, the Pentagon received multiple complaints about a police checkpoint program in Greenfield. The complaints came from military personnel stationed nearby who'd been subjected to what they described as discriminatory treatment. She walked to the display, highlighting specific areas. Initial review suggested Fourth Amendment violations, but further investigation revealed something far more disturbing. The map zoomed in, showing checkpoint locations. Every single one was positioned between Westfield Heights and the wealthier neighborhoods. Selective enforcement, Victoria continued. Checkpoints strategically placed to intercept residents leaving minority neighborhoods. But we needed proof. We needed documentation. We needed someone to experience the system firsthand. She turned to face Stone directly. So I volunteered. Stone's mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Pierce pulled up new data, arrest statistics, search rates, demographic breakdowns. The numbers told a damning story. Checkpoint stops resulting in searches, Victoria read from the screen. 89% minority drivers. Arrests from those stops, 94% minority citizens. Raymond shifted uncomfortably. Crime statistics justify deployment. Traffic violations occur at equal rates across all demographics, Victoria interrupted. Yet your checkpoint program produced these results. She changed the display to show internal police emails. Captain Raymond, this is your message to officers, dated March 12th. Victoria read aloud. Focus on vehicles from Westfield Heights. Higher yield for arrests. Raymond went pale. And here, Victoria continued, pulling up another document, are your arrest quotas, specifically targeting Westfield Heights residents. Stone stood abruptly. Those operational details were handled by the police department. As councilman, I merely approved the program concept. Is that so? Victoria nodded to Pierce, who displayed a new document. Stone's signature appeared at the bottom of detailed checkpoint operating procedures. The document specified target neighborhoods, suggested enforcement tactics, and outlined quota systems. This directive, Victoria said, her voice hard as iron, has your signature, Councilman. You authorized racial profiling. Stone sank back into his chair, his political facade shattering like glass. Detective Cortez, Victoria turned to him. Please share what you found during your internal investigation. Cortez stood, opening his file. 6 months ago, I noticed troubling patterns in checkpoint arrests. When I raised concerns through proper channels, I was reassigned to desk duty. He placed documents on the table. I continued documenting discrepancies. Checkpoint officers were instructed to use different standards based on driver's race and residence. Westfield Heights vehicles received heightened scrutiny regardless of actual driving behavior. That's not, Raymond started. Your body camera footage contradicts you, Captain, Victoria interrupted. She played a video on the main screen. The footage showed Raymond briefing officers before a checkpoint deployment. His voice was clear. Remember, Westfield cars get the full treatment. Find a reason to stop them. Make it stick. The councilman wants numbers. The room fell silent. But there's more, Victoria said, her voice taking on an edge of anger for the first time. Detective Cortez, tell them about your brother. Cortez's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, my brother came to visit me. He's a pediatric surgeon. Drives a nice car. He was stopped at one of these checkpoints, detained for 3 hours, searched multiple times. No charges. No reason. Just harassment. His voice cracked slightly. They only saw a black man driving through what they considered their neighborhood. When I tried to file a complaint, it disappeared. When I pushed harder, I was threatened with termination. Victoria placed a hand on Cortez's shoulder. Your courage in continuing to gather evidence despite threats has been crucial to this investigation. She turned back to Stone and Raymond. This wasn't just about traffic enforcement. This was systematic oppression with a specific purpose. Pierce pulled up new documents, financial records, development plans, correspondence between Stone and real estate developers. Councilman Stone received substantial campaign contributions from developers, Victoria explained. Developers who wanted to revitalize Westfield Heights. Their strategy required one thing: displacing current residents. The documents told the story in black and white. Development proposals, property acquisition plans, and right in the middle, the checkpoint program. The checkpoints weren't about safety, Victoria said, her voice filled with disgust. They were about harassment. Make life difficult enough for Westfield Heights residents, and they'd leave. Property values would drop. Your developer friends could buy cheap, gentrify, and profit. She displayed an email from Stone to a developer. The checkpoint program is working as intended. Complaints from Westfield are up 300%. Give it another 6 months, they'll be ready to sell. Stone stood again, panic replacing political composure. This is fabricated. A politically motivated attack. The evidence speaks for itself, Victoria replied calmly. She nodded to Cortez, who connected his USB drive to the system. Detective Cortez conducted his own internal investigation, Victoria explained, documenting the checkpoint operations from within. Cortez's files appeared on screen. Officer performance reviews tied specifically to Westfield Heights arrest numbers. Checkpoint schedules deliberately targeting times when black churches let out, when community centers were active, when local businesses saw peak traffic. Most critically, Cortez added, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, I discovered that complaints about checkpoint practices were systematically buried. The evidence flooded the screen. Complaint forms marked resolved, without any investigation. Witness statements altered. Video evidence deleted from servers. When residents attempted to use proper channels for redress, Victoria said, the system was designed to silence them. She walked to stand directly in front of Stone. You didn't just violate the Fourth Amendment, Councilman. You weaponized law enforcement for financial gain. You systematically oppressed an entire community. And when people tried to fight back through legal means, you crushed them. The USB drive revealed one final piece of evidence, a recording of Stone speaking at a private dinner with developers. His voice filled the room. The beauty of the checkpoint program is plausible deniability. We say it's about safety. The media buys it. And meanwhile, we make Westfield so uncomfortable they'll beg to leave. Property values are already dropping. Another year, and we'll own that whole neighborhood. Stone collapsed into his chair, all pretense gone. My arrest last night, Victoria said, walking back to the head of the table, wasn't random. It was the final test. After 6 months of surveillance, data collection, and evidence gathering, I volunteered to experience your system directly. She held up her wrist, showing the watch. Military-grade recording device. Every word. Every constitutional violation. Every moment of harassment documented. Raymond stared at the watch in horror. You arrested me without probable cause, Victoria continued. Searched my vehicle without consent. Denied my right to counsel. Used excessive force. And through it all, you confirmed exactly what our investigation predicted. A Justice Department official stood from his seat at the side of the room. "We've seen enough. This evidence supports federal civil rights charges under Section 1983. Conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights. Abuse of power under color of law." FBI agents moved toward Stone and Raymond. "This is a misunderstanding," Stone shouted, his last attempt at control. "The program had legitimate public safety goals." "The evidence contradicts that claim," Victoria replied. "Your own words, your own emails, your own directives, all of it proves deliberate discrimination motivated by greed." Stone pointed at her, anger replacing panic. "You intentionally provoked this. Created this situation. Entrapment. I drove through a public checkpoint," Victoria said calmly. "I asserted my constitutional rights. My arrest was your choice, Councilman. Your illegal checkpoint was your creation. I simply documented what you were already doing to hundreds of other citizens." She activated one final display, a list of names, dates, and case numbers. "Hundreds of entries. These are the people whose lives you damaged," Victoria said softly. "People arrested without cause. People who lost jobs, scholarships, opportunities because of your illegal program. Every single one of these cases will be reviewed. Convictions will be overturned. Records will be expunged. And you will face the same justice system you perverted." An FBI agent stepped forward. "Councilman Gerald Stone, you are under federal investigation for civil rights violations, conspiracy, and abuse of power. You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights," Stone shouted. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "Everyone does. That's precisely the point." 3 months later, Victoria stood in a congressional hearing room, the gallery packed with observers, press, and officials. Her dress uniform was immaculate, medals and ribbons testament to decades of distinguished service. The committee chairman gavelled the session to order. "This hearing on civil rights enforcement in local policing will now begin. General Reeves, thank you for your testimony." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Please summarize the Pentagon's investigation into the Greenfield Checkpoint program." Victoria spoke clearly, professionally, laying out the 6-month investigation. The discriminatory patterns, the constitutional violations, the financial motivations. She presented evidence methodically, building an undeniable case. "Most concerning," Victoria continued, "was that the program operated with explicit government approval. Councilman Stone personally directed police to target specific demographics. This wasn't rogue officers. This was systematic oppression from the top down." A committee member leaned forward. "And the current status of those involved?" Councilman Stone was convicted on federal civil rights charges. He's currently serving 5 years. Captain Raymond and Officer Brandon were also convicted, 3 years each. The checkpoint program has been permanently terminated. And most importantly, all 347 convictions stemming from unconstitutional checkpoints have been reviewed. 212 have been expunged. The chairman nodded gravely. "General Reeves, your decision to personally test the checkpoint system was controversial. What motivated this approach?" Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Chairman, sometimes systems only reveal their true nature through direct experience. As a Black woman and a military officer, I was uniquely positioned to document the disparity between how citizens should be treated and how they were actually treated." She looked directly at the cameras. "I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When a city government weaponizes law enforcement to oppress its own citizens, that's a domestic threat. That demands action." "Detective Luis Cortez," the chairman said, "whose internal investigation provided crucial evidence, please stand." Cortez rose from the gallery. The room applauded. "Detective Cortez risked his career to document these violations," Victoria said. "His ethical commitment represents the best of law enforcement. I'm pleased to report he's accepted a position with the FBI Civil Rights Division." The hearing continued for 2 more hours. Victoria answered every question with precision and passion, always returning to the core principle: equal protection under law. As the session concluded, the chairman made an announcement. "Based on this investigation and General Reeves' recommendations, we are introducing the Equitable Enforcement Act. This legislation will establish federal standards for checkpoint operations, requiring transparency, accountability, and constitutional compliance in all jurisdictions." The gallery erupted in applause. Outside the hearing room, Victoria found Cortez waiting. "The committee was impressed," she told him. You made a difference, Luis. Cortez smiled, but sadness lingered in his eyes. My brother still has nightmares about that checkpoint stop. 3 hours of being treated like a criminal, and he'd done nothing wrong. His record is clear now, Victoria said gently. And he's helping organize the class action lawsuit for other checkpoint victims. Turning pain into purpose. He told me you called him personally. Apologized on behalf of the government. Victoria nodded. It was the least I could do. He deserved better. Everyone did. They walked through the Capitol building, past marble columns and paintings of historical moments. Moments when people stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. General, Cortez asked, was it worth it? The arrest, the harassment, the risk? Victoria stopped, looking back at the hearing room where change was taking root. Every single second. Because now 212 people have their lives back. Because departments across the country are reforming. Because the next person stopped at a checkpoint has protection they didn't have before. She smiled. Justice works slowly, Luis. But it does work, when good people insist upon it. 6 months later, Westfield Heights Community Center. Victoria sat in the back row, wearing civilian clothes, watching as the new police chief addressed residents. The room was packed, families, elderly residents, young people, all listening as reformed policies were explained. Body cameras mandatory and always active. Stop data made public. A community oversight board with real authority. After the meeting, an elderly woman approached Victoria. Her face was lined with years of struggle, but her eyes held hope. You're the general, aren't you? She asked. The one who brought down those checkpoints. I just helped expose the truth, Victoria replied. The community did the real work, by never giving up, by documenting, by insisting on justice. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My grandson was arrested at one of those checkpoints. He lost his college scholarship because of it. We thought his life was over. She gripped Victoria's hand. His record was cleared last month. He's back in school now, studying law. Says he wants to be a civil rights attorney. Victoria smiled, emotion swelling in her chest. That's wonderful. We need people like him. He wants to meet you someday, the woman continued. Wants to thank you for giving him his future back. Tell him, Victoria said gently, that his future was always his. He just needed the system to get out of his way. Outside, Cortez waited by the car. He was heading back to D.C., to his new position with the FBI. Ready to go, General? Victoria looked back at the community center. At families walking freely on the streets. At children playing without fear. At a neighborhood no longer under siege. The checkpoint station stood empty now, scheduled for demolition. In its place, the city was building a community garden. Yeah, Victoria said. I'm ready. As they drove away, Cortez glanced at her. What's next for you? Victoria pulled out her tablet, showing him a map of the United States. Red flags marked 17 locations. Pentagon has identified other jurisdictions with suspicious patterns, she explained. Checkpoints concentrated around minority neighborhoods. Disparate enforcement data. Complaint suppression. More investigations? More opportunities for justice, Victoria corrected. The Greenfield operation proved our methods work. Now we expand. She looked at the map, at the communities waiting for someone to care, to fight, to stand up. Systems only change when people force them to change, Victoria said. And I'm not done forcing. 1 year later, the Pentagon. General Victoria Reeves stood before a wall of monitors in a secure conference room. Each screen showed data from cities across America. Checkpoint locations. Enforcement statistics. Complaint patterns. 17 jurisdictions had voluntarily reformed after learning about the Greenfield investigation. 9 were under active federal investigation. And the Equitable Enforcement Act had passed Congress, establishing national standards for checkpoint operations. Colonel Pierce entered with a status report. Morning, General. The reforms are holding. Checkpoint complaints are down 63% nationwide. And the holdouts? Justice Department has filed charges in 3 cases. 2 others are negotiating consent decrees. Victoria studied the map. So much progress. So much still to do. Her phone buzzed. A text from the elderly woman's grandson, the young man who'd lost his scholarship. First day of law school. Thinking of you. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Victoria smiled and typed back. You gave yourself that chance by never giving up. Now go change the world. She looked out the window at the American flag waving in the breeze. At the country she'd sworn to defend. not just from foreign threats, but from the internal failures that betrayed its founding principles. A young Air Force lieutenant appeared on one of the monitors. A new case, a new complaint, another person needing justice. "All right," Victoria said, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's see what we've got." Because the work never ended. Injustice never slept. And neither would she. No checkpoints. No double standards. Just equal justice under law. The Constitution didn't protect some people. It protected everyone. And General Victoria Reeves would spend every day making sure that promise was kept. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that justice is worth fighting for, hit that like button right now. Your support helps us create more powerful stories that matter. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly uploads. We bring you gripping justice thrillers, stories of courage against corruption, and narratives that prove one person really can make a difference. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in General Reeves' position? Have you ever witnessed injustice and wished someone would stand up? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because justice doesn't just speak volumes. It roars when good people refuse to stay silent. Next week, a disabled veteran takes on a corrupt VA system that's denying benefits to thousands. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, your rights matter. Your voice matters. And justice is worth fighting for. Justice speaks volumes.